Welcome to Voices of the Community, which explores critical issues facing Northern California communities. We introduce you to the voices of community thought leaders and change makers who are working on solutions that face our fellow individual community members, neighborhoods, cities, and our region. This is George Koster, your host. This episode is part of our series exploring COVID-19's impact on nonprofits and small businesses in San Francisco. We started the series back in April of 2020 during the height of the first phase of the COVID-19 pandemic and the shelter-in-place requirements. Over these past 9 months, the COVID-19 pandemic and economic meltdown has wiped out millions of jobs in both the nonprofit and small business sectors, as well as shuttered tens of thousands of small business operations. The goal of the series is to shine a spotlight on the nonprofits, small businesses, and their staff who are struggling to deal with the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on their operations, services, and sustainability. The series of interviews we conducted features voices from a cross-section of organizations that make up the fabric of our community. Each of them brings a unique perspective on how they and we are dealing with the issues facing our community during the global pandemic and economic depression.
I think the silver lining for our vendors have been that it has really caused them to be very creative and to literally turn on the dime and to really be listening to their customers and thinking about what else could they offer, how might they package an item differently so that they can sell it through the box, what are the words that they need to use, because you don't have a customer coming up to your beautiful chicken wings that is all glazed and looking yummy. How do you describe that, right, in writing?
In this episode, our featured voices are Andrea Baker, the founder of both Andrea Baker Consulting and the nonprofit En2action, along with Pooja, Rajani, who leads the organization's operations and project management. I first worked with Andrea back in 2015 in the production of our 2-part series, Doing Business in the Bayview, which I recommend that you listen to for more context on her team's efforts in working with the Bayview Hunters Point community economically and culturally to reinvent their community. You could find the 2-part series in our archives on georgekoster.com. Click on Voices of the Community and on the archives. Andrea and Pooja have been working tirelessly in the Bayview Hunters Point community of San Francisco from our last Great Recession in 2008 to today's COVID-19 pandemic and economic meltdown. Throughout this time, Andrea and Pooja have helped to incubate, cultivate, advise, and promote food and beverage entrepreneurs as well as artisans in the Bayview Hunters Point neighborhood. Their work with small business owners enables them to execute their dreams of controlling their own destinies and provide an economic legacy for their families. The backdrop of today's interview is COVID-19's impact on the small business restaurants that make up the economic and cultural fabric of our neighborhoods and their struggle to stay alive. From April to June, the city of San Francisco's sales tax revenues dropped to $30.8 million. That's down 43% from the previous year, according to the city. Restaurants and bar sales were down 65% as indoor dining was prohibited, while food and drugstore sales were down 8%. Among those indoor venues, restaurants were easily the riskiest, 4 times riskier than gyms and coffee shops, according to the model by Stanford and Northwestern University scientists. But the researchers also found that restaurant occupancy caps of 20% could cut infections by as much as 80%. The city of San Francisco is once again acting quickly to reduce indoor activities as the COVID-19 case rate in San Francisco went from 3.7 to 9 per 100,000 residents, and Grant Colfax, the city's director of health, said that San Francisco's daily average of 80 new cases is up from 32 at the end of October. This has led Mayor London Breed to announce Tuesday, November 10th, that San Francisco restaurants will have to close their indoor dining rooms on Friday, November 13th, due to the rise in coronavirus cases.
I'm joined remotely via Zoom by Andrea Baker and Pooja Rajani from Andrea Baker Consulting. Thanks for being here, Andrea and Pooja. I'd like to start the interview with asking Andrea a little bit about why you created the En2action nonprofit and then how you're working with small businesses and art organizations.
Thanks for that, George, and thanks for having us. So you know that we for years did work in the Bayview, the Fillmore, Excelsior as Andrea Baker Consulting, meeting a lot of the same needs and hopefully doing a lot of the same work that we're going to be talking about. But we were not a nonprofit. We were a sole proprietorship, and that made it extremely difficult for us to access funds to do the work we really love and want to do in community. And so it took me all of 12 years, George, but we got there and we created En2action. And so En2action, while Andrea Baker Consulting still exists, En2action does about 85-90% of what we did previously. So that work that we started over 15 years ago, working with small businesses and arts organizations in neighborhoods, again, like the Bayview, Excelsior, the Fillmore. And we started that because we wanted to connect small businesses with resources and opportunities. And we just thought that it was really important to get them, to formalize their businesses if they weren't already formalized, and to be able to take advantage of opportunities that came around. And so I guess I would give examples like we came up with putting small businesses and arts and culture together. So having the live music be performed in restaurants along the 3rd Street corridor. That allowed us to put musicians to work and to bring business to the restaurants along the corridor. We also early on created the Big Summer Music Series, where for a 4 to 6 week period, we had musicians going into restaurants every day, along the corridor. And again, that was another way of bringing arts and small business together. And also, I just want to highlight that District 10 is really considered, an artisan. Remember, we've got the PDRs, right? Production, distribution, and repair. And we have a lot of artisans, folks making chocolate and cakes and food and all of that stuff. And we have the largest artist colony in the country, 300 artists at the shipyard. So we wanted to try to bring all these wonderful elements of the Bayview together.
Thank you. That was great. I'm going to turn to Pooja, and I know you're the Operation Ninja in the background, making all of Andrea's visions work. And they are quite big sometimes, which is great. But here we are in the middle of a pandemic going on month 10. How has COVID-19 impacted your ability to work your operational magic?
Well, I think like everyone, we've all been working from home. And, one of the things that we had been faced with was it primarily all of our interactions were face-to-face. A lot of them involve a lot of like basic interpersonal skills that are much more like physical and very hands-on. And so we had to also transition to sort of like learning all of these things virtually and sort of being very creative and thinking about how do we continue to engage businesses and support all the organizations that we work with virtually. And so some of the things that we've learned have been sort of transitioning to virtual platforms, looking at, virtual meetings as well, just like everybody else has. And we transitioned Bayview Bistro, which was actually much more of a physical location, which was, primarily on like 4101 3rd Street. So we took that operation and we actually had to stop the physical site. And then we transitioned now to a virtual platform where we got all the vendors online onto Shopify through the Bayview Bistro box. So we basically started working with vendors, tried to get them to curate products that were much more packaged, and also like showcase their products, their skills, and then put it in a box format where we were able to come up with like a weekly food box that featured like, when we started, it was 5 vendors and we're continuing to add more vendors to these weekly boxes. And we've got like different kind of boxes. So we started with, obviously omnivore and a plant forward box. And now we've launched the date night box. So it's just a smaller box. And then now we're also selling a lot more of the vegan boxes. So that's sort of where we've transitioned the Bayview Bistro. And then also learning how to sort of do a lot of our work online by trying to see virtual meetings, virtual platforms, looking at engagement tools that can, avoid Zoom meeting fatigue or like virtual meeting fatigues. So those are just some of the things we're doing in the middle of like COVID. Just like everybody else, we're all learning and being nimble and flexible.
Yes, I think the key word I've heard many times is pivot. So people are getting tired of pivoting. Maybe they can all become ballerinas or something. So Andrea, why did you create Bayview Bistro project? And then how can people help the Bayview Bistro project?
So when we first started Bayview Bistro, the intention was always to create an opportunity for our Black and brown micro businesses through a racial and social equity lens. So we had a vacant space on 3rd Street, and our goal was how could we create an opportunity for 3 or 4 times a week for pop-ups, caterers, food trucks that again were primarily from the Black and brown community to have an opportunity to be able to vend. And we thought this was a good thing because, and we worked with the social impact partnership program that SFPUC had put in. So this money did not come from SFPUC, but SFPUC was very much ahead of their time and created a program where consultants on the project support neighborhood projects. And so we got support through that program to support what we call the Bayview Bistro, open Wednesday through Saturdays, essentially. And so we started that again to give opportunity to our smaller businesses that did not have a brick and mortar space. We also hoped that through making that opportunity available, one, we could provide great technical assistance and help some of our businesses still needed some help in formalizing their businesses. And we also wanted to be able to introduce them to the larger city economy. So most of our vendors have become city suppliers, which allows them to get in the queue and hopefully get orders, catering orders and other orders through the city. So that really was what pushed us. And that was behind putting together the Bayview Bistro. Your second question was, how can people support?
Yes, how can people support? So back to Pooja's point, you've kind of commoditized and put the food or dinner in a box ideas. So can people order online? Can they call direct? Or do they go, since you're a nonprofit now, can people donate?
We want them to do all of those things. So thank you for that, because we say order a Bayview Bistro box for you, your friends, your family. Order a Bayview Bistro box and give it as a gift. We are coming out with a Thanksgiving and holiday box. And over the last 6 weeks, we now have a Friday night date box. Order a date night box and give yourself a break, or order it for somebody that you love. Donate to our program. Tag your friends and tell everybody you know about us. And I do mean everybody you know about us. Call us to order for catering. We've been working with all of our vendors, and they have now created individually packaged meals because we are in COVID-19. So we're not doing buffets anymore, not at this point. One day, maybe again. But you can order catered meals from us, and we encourage you to do that. So all of those things will help our Bayview Bistro program. And always, always tag and support our vendors.
So I think 2 final questions. One, Andrea, you've been at this a long time, along with Pooja, working on the Bayview corridor, obviously with the Mayor's Office of Workforce and Economic Development. So over your decade plus of doing this work, what would you say has been your biggest impact on small businesses and art organizations, especially along the whole Bayview District 10 corridor?
Well, I feel, George, like one of the biggest impacts we've made actually over the last 10 years for me is bringing residents, as you pointed out, and thank you for dating me. It's been more than a decade of working in the Bayview. And when we started, I feel like one of the greatest things that we did, and certainly I didn't do it alone with others as well, was getting our residents to come out and discover our small businesses, our artisan makers, our artists and our musicians. So way back when, with BPOH, we started things like Bayview Connect, which were monthly gatherings where we would host Bayview business and we would have music and an artist and that sort of stuff. So I really do feel that led from Bayview Connect. We went to Community Tuesdays with Radio Africa. I think you might even remember that. And that was an initiative that was focused on how do we bring residents out for a $10 fabulous meal. I still believe it's the best deal yet in San Francisco. And we were able to do that. And then we continued encouraging developers and city agencies. Hey, when you come into this community, you need to order from these great food and beverage businesses. You need to support our businesses so that they too can thrive. And then I think almost 6 years ago, we ended up doing the Bayview on Court event. And Bayview on Court is intended to shine a bright light on all of our Bayview artisans, our beverage makers, our artists and musicians. I really feel that for me, that is something that I've been really proud of. I think, we kind of started that effort of getting our neighbors and residents to look around and see that they had these great treasures in the neighborhood. And since then, they've been supporting them perfectly. We love that.
Thank you. That was great. I'm going to turn back to Pooja and ask, out of the pandemic and the proverbial economic meltdown, what are some of the good things do you think could come out of it, or that you see coming out of it, to help both small businesses, nonprofits, especially District 10, which has been, hit pretty hard with the pandemic?
I think, if anything, there's been more light and more sort of like an awareness, right, of small businesses and how people really need to support the small businesses to continue to contribute to the economy. And also from a diversity standpoint, there has also been an increase in sort of like a racial or sensitivity to like racial injustices. And so we feel like that also has been something that is sort of positive that has come to, help all the businesses that are part of the Bayview. And hopefully, people can support businesses of color, entrepreneurs of color. And I also think actually, and I know Andrea addressed this, is sort of like we're all learning to be, I think, compassionate, with each other in a way, as businesses, as, nonprofits. And we're learning to collaborate a lot more as well on ideas, sharing resources and opportunities. And I know Andrea also had like a thought, so I will let her take as well.
I think what Pooja just said is very true. I mean, and we all know that unfortunately, the killing of George Floyd, right, for many, many people, not just Black and brown people, but people all over this country, to really sort of say there is systemic racism and we need to do things differently. So I do hope that can be a sustained sentiment. And I think all of the things that Pooja talked about are true as well. I also think, because I look at this always from the point of view of our vendors, I think one of the wonderful things, they say, this is certainly a cliche, but there is a silver lining to every cloud. And I think the silver lining for our vendors have been that it has really caused them to be very creative and to literally turn on the dime and to really be listening to their customers and thinking about what else could they offer, how might they package an item differently so that they can sell it through the box, what are the words that they need to use, because, you don't have a customer coming up to your beautiful chicken wings that is all glazed and looking yummy. How do you describe that, right, in writing? So I really think it's caused our vendors to really discover even more about themselves and their product and to create new avenues of opportunity.
So an opportunity to reinvent. Andrea and Pooja, any last final thoughts?
Well, I think you've covered a lot of them. I'm just so happy that you were able to talk with Rome, because you see how important this work is that we're all doing, and how important it is to continue to create opportunities for Black and Brown businesses.
Well, thank you, Andrea and Pooja, for sharing all of your work today. I'm going to make sure that we'll share out all of your social media on our website and in the broadcast itself. And please stay safe out there as we all deal with what has become this very strange new normal.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, George, for having us on. We really appreciate it.
That's it for this episode of Voices of the Community. You've been listening to the voices of Andrea Baker and Pooja Rajani of both Andrea Baker Consulting and the nonprofit En2action. Andrea and Pooja have launched the Bayview Bistro project to help food and beverage entrepreneurs as well as artisans in the Bayview Hunters Point neighborhood. Find out more about the Bayview Bistro, go to bayviewbistrosf.com. And to find out about the services of En2actions, go to en2action.org. We hope that you enjoyed the insights, points of view, and personal stories from the voices of changemakers and their nonprofits and small businesses featured in this series. To find out more and get engaged with the nonprofits, small businesses, and staff members featured in this series, please go to my website, georgekoster.com, and click on Voices of the Community to find links to the extended versions of these interviews and to listen to the entire series. After listening to these stories, we hope that you will consider making a donation and volunteering to provide a hand up to your fellow community members. I want to thank my associate producer, Eric Estrada, along with Mel, Lila, Michael, and Laura at the San Francisco Public Press and KSFP. To listen to our next episode in this series and to our archived past shows, which feature community voices working on solutions to critical issues facing Northern California communities, please go to georgekoster.com. While you're on our website, please sign up for our newsletter to find out more about future shows. Please subscribe to Voices of the Community on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and Google Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at George Koster, and we'd love to hear from you with feedback and show ideas. So send us an email to george@georgekoster.com. I'm George Koster in San Francisco, and thank you for listening.